Welcome to TradeTheMBA.com. This is John. This report is for the 1st of August. And, well, as much as I was talking about it when we were back here at the 50% instead of move above there, we were likely going to head to our previous algo start, which happened right here at the beginning of July. Yeah, couldn't predict necessarily they were going to do it all in one day. But this shows you what happens with the power of the options in the situation and how you have to counter the side that's pushing in one direction and they go opposite. And this is the kind of explosion you get. That's a lot of short covering push to move things. From an economic standpoint, did anything change? No, actually, things got worse. But that's a different issue. That's also a bonus for the market because it just depends on your perspective and how they want to spin it. But bad news can be good news, and then good news sometimes is bad news. But sometimes good news is good news, and bad news is good news. That's why we don't really care about those kinds of things. At the end of the day, it's simply where can you put money to get yield, and can you put them in treasuries? So it doesn't leave a whole lot of options. From an NQ standpoint, we had talked about the NQ being stronger, starting off from there, but it's just approaching its 50%. So it's going to hit a little resistance. Hasn't made it back to that same algo startup point. Comparative to the S&P, so it has a little bit more room to go, which means that could drive things a little bit. And this is the disaster. Yields continue to decline. The expectation this Fed is just going to drop rates to zero. And again, the bond market is going to look foolish, but they don't really care because this forces money into equities, makes everything look pretty good. When you look at oil, it was heading in the right direction and then completely reversed and went the opposite direction. Now we see the conflict with Iran and Israel heating up again. This is what I mentioned. These are the kind of little hiccups that can really throw things. And a move of oil like this is going to be significant, particularly if it heads back towards the highs and we get in the mid 80s. Your inflation makes it impossible for the Fed to really do anything in well, they can do it, but it just the reality of what it would cause economically is just insane from an inflationary standpoint. So limitations, of course, is horrible news for the euro because again, you have to transfer into dollars, and what do you want a euro for? But still impressive they've been able to keep it this high. Uh, Given what we're seeing from the eurozone, it's a disaster area. And of course, I told you about this. We knew that gold was going to be skyrocketing back up, and not just as a hedge, but just as a representation of how much devaluation you're seeing from a U.S. currency standpoint, because the gold's traded in dollars. And I think that trend is just going to continue. The impact it's having for crypto a little bit negative, but again, we know that there's some shenanigans going on within that. Of course, you had the Biden administration, decide to move crypto from, cold storage into an active wallet and moving it around to make it look like they might sell it, and that kind of heavy display. Not to mention the Mt. Gox situation. You're going to have supply issues, but overall, I think that the upside trend is built into the equation because miners can't go forever the way things are with the halving and stuff at the price level, and so it's going to create a boon. It's just a question of when. ETH obviously suffering similar but a little bit more dramatic. Not a big deal there from our 50K standpoint. So we've had that marker of the positive extremes from over here. It's pretty close to the daily one. Program like turnaround, boom, buy, once you get over the 50, and then it's just been nonstop straight up from there. Cyan was under red, always buy, and you continued with steel, maintaining a low. But now you notice an interesting one about this, though. The steel has not stayed into a negative. It's actually bounced back above. That poses an interesting one. So, like when we look at it from a negative standpoint, you can see the steel remains elevated for quite some time. And just the opposite happens. Steel remains on the low side when you have a strong uptrend. So it's relatively short. If the steel were still further down here and you were getting some negative pullback, that would be one thing. But the fact that it's completely reset here means that we could get back and forth, and I would expect that we're probably going to struggle back and forth between that previous algo because there's no way they acquired enough volume in order to meet their needs. So usually it takes a little bit more time to fill that all in. But you can see how, from an option standpoint, it's really a driver of the market these days because dealers are forced to apply a serious amount of capital to convert things back to get a balanced book. And so, if you had this expectation with a lot of people believing that things were going to continue to move lower, buying lots of puts, they've got to buy calls or actual stocks correspondingly to it. And it has its inverse effect until they get a balance, and then they're neutralized and they can move forward. And that's why we see a lot of this volatility, and it's been increased. Would expect it to start slowing down a little bit into this month, but if there's political upheaval in that, volatility could range. You can see here in the European session right now, things are a little back and forth, but still right up above where the close was. So it's fairly neutral, but still reading plus 25 at this particular stage. So it means a little bit less when you're at these levels. If we were at 2,025 points is a lot, but 55, 58, 600 doesn't really represent as much. But that's the long and the short of it. And I think that it's exciting because I think within that range, this level of volatility provides a lot of opportunity. So it's one of those opportunities to just really be in the market and playing that volatility because it doesn't happen all the time, and everyone's going to be crying when it goes back to a bit smaller range. So don't be afraid of it. As always, know anything relevant, I'll put it in the Skype chat. Have a good one. Trade well.